Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. Welcome back to the channel. It's me, Only Run Very Noob, bringing you Bravo gameplay on the Talishar client. Today we're playing against Uzuri, which is kind of an interesting matchup. It's a little bit slower and grindier. My plan is generally to just play sort of like a mid-range value game, getting a lot of value out of the hammer and trying to go long and just kind of work incremental advantages where I can. I used to run all 70 cards in this matchup and try to do more of a fatiguey game plan, but honestly the two blocks just weren't really great for me. Like playing as Zealous Belting is always nice, but being forced to block with it or something like that kind of sucks. And also when you run all 70 of your cards, sometimes it can be tough to just draw Zealous Belting and two blues, which is sort of what you need to turn it on. And if you draw Zealous Belting in a 3-red hand, of course you could always just like block with 2 of the reds, hammer for 4, and then Arsenal Zealous Belting. But if you played against Uzuri, you know that she is very good at destroying your arsenal, and putting a high value on your arsenal is not exactly where you want to be in this matchup. I'm not saying don't ever arsenal cards, but arsenaling cards probably shouldn't be part of your core value strategy. Of course, there are a few cards that are good in Arsenal, like Defense Reactions or Sigil of Solace, but your threats are generally not very safe tucked away in your arsenal. So I cut the 2 blocks. Here, we'll get into the video. Show you sideboarding here. This is interesting. Maybe I had a different plan here. Like I had the pummels in instead of the choke slams when this was recorded. But recently I've been keeping choke slams in and cutting pummel. So this might be kind of interesting actually. But yeah, I definitely, like today, after recording this video, I would be keeping in choke slam and sighting out pummel. I think pummel's okay to like as a win condition to close the game out and always sort of have that threat, but most opponents are going to not want to lose to pummel anyway, even without seeing it in your deck. So you sort of get a little bit of like fear value out of your pummel. Like if someone's at 4 life, for instance, and you hammer in for 6 with 2 floating and a card in arsenal, they might not want to die to pummel. So they might like overblock, or they might make sure they block when they have a defense reaction up or whatever. And honestly, I don't think you need it to close out a game. I think if you get to the point where they're low life and you're at a good life, you can just sort of grind them out with the hammer. Your hammer is way more efficient than their daggers, and if you have a high enough life lead, you probably don't need to like win conditions. You can just sort of do what you're going to do and force them to block and kind of win the game through that way. The equipment we play is Anothos, of course, and then Crown of Providence, Tectonic Plating, Crater Fist, and Civic Steps. Civic Steps is kind of interesting in this matchup because giving them a quicken only really works if they want to like have 2 big attacks, and they can play like 1 big attack, give it go again, and then play a stealth attack and swap it in. But if their plan is to like stealth and swap, the quicken gives go again to the stealth attack, and then when it swaps into a new attack, it loses go again, which is a little interesting. Definitely just try to use them like at the end of the game though, when they can't like hold big hands. That's my go-to way to use Civic Steps, is just like save them for as long as possible, and when your opponent's at low life, they can't really keep big hands to like go again on you a bunch. So yeah, I'm still learning how to use these Civic Steps. They've only been out a few weeks, and I think they're probably pretty difficult to use optimally, so still working on that. We end up going first here. We see they have 70 cards, 66 plus 4. We're only on 64 total. If we look at their equipment, they're on Snapdragon Scalers and Crown of Providence, leading me to believe they're a little bit more aggressive than builds you might see with Black Tech Whisperers and Mask of Perdition, I believe, the one that helps them mill like an extra card off your deck. So it's kind of interesting to see like the aggro version, but also like a 70 card pile. Maybe they're afraid of getting fatigued as opposed to enacting that as their core game plan. But with this hand, I'm probably just going to make a surge and hammer for 6. Of course, like attacking them on the first turn, you're probably not going to leak any damage. You're going to give them an opportunity to filter their hand. But if I see 70 cards, I'm like, okay, I got to start eating some of those cards before they maybe enact a fatigue plan into me. Although I did just say with Snapdragon Scalers and Crown of Providence, it doesn't really seem like their plan is to fatigue me. So maybe attacking with the hammer here was bad. But I kind of like just getting 2 cards for 0, then arsenaling a defense react, and having a defense react and arsenal ready to go. They only block for 5, so we actually do leak a damage. And they block with an attack with 1 power, which is one of the reasons I probably shouldn't attack with hammer, because now their looking for scraps are turned on. And it's probably a mistake by me that I don't want to turn on their looking for a scrap. And of course we get punished immediately because they have looking for a scrap. The only thing we can really do with our hand that's aggressive is play Terra Sunder and to hammer for 7. And I'm not like, that's not something I'm like needing to do. So I think against this, I'm just going to block. I think I'm probably going to block 4 here. I might even just block 3. Just block 3 and save my defense react for in case they play a stealth attack and swap. But they just play Already Dead by itself. So we could end up taking 2 damage to hammer for, like, make a surge and hammer for 6 and then arsenal our other D-react. Or we could fully block it out and then just hammer for 4 and arsenal a D-react. Those are really the only reasonable lines here. I guess sort of a backwards line we could take is just block 6 with our 2 blues and then like pitch the defense reaction to make a surge, but I don't really love that. I think I kind of want to start like using the hammer to get cards out of his deck and make it so if the game does go to fatigue, we're still going to win that with having 6 less cards in our starting deck. So I think just blocking as much damage as possible is good, only hammering for 4. Because with Uzuri, you really don't want to like trade damage equally. You kind of want to be making efficient trades and waiting for bigger spots where you can play like Crippling Crush or Starstruck. Because if the game goes long and you're just kind of like both losing life at an equal rate, when you're both at like 5 or under, Uzuri's like super favored because they can deal a lot, like some of their damage is a lot harder to stop if they play like Isolate, Shred. Sometimes they just have like 6 damage that you can't really stop. Because Isolate, of course, has Dominate, and Shred would like make the card you're blocking with block less or not at all. Another hand that's not very aggressive. We do have 2 defense reactions, one in arsenal, one in hand, so we can probably stop whatever they're going to be doing. Unfortunately, we don't, like our other 3 cards can't threaten too much. They're attacking with Spider's Bite. We can just take this Spider's Bite quite easily. We have 2 blues that aren't attacks that we can block with. But we are looking to block with a couple blues and maybe a defense reaction, and then keep a blue to hammer for 4, and hopefully hold on to the defense reaction in arsenal. They play an even bigger than that. That's kind of interesting inclusion. I've seen it before in Uzuri, but I can't say it's that common. They get a Cadaverous Contraband, but they don't have any non-attacks in their graveyard, so it effectively doesn't have an on-hit. It's just kind of 6 go again here, which isn't bad. I do think I'm going to block with Sink Blow and Arsenal just in case. The card they follow up with here is Command and Conquer. But we don't have to cover up the other 2 damage here. We can just take 2 and block 4. Oh, it looks like I'm just gonna block 6, and I'm not going to use the defense reaction in Arsenal, which seems very loose, because if they play Command and Conquer here, we get punished for using Fate Foreseen instead of the Sink Blow and Arsenal. So that's a slight mistake by me. And they come in with a Shakedown. They haven't played a reaction this link, so it's not turned on, although it could get turned on from Flick Knives or Shred and Arsenal. Or maybe something else in Arsenal that I'm not thinking of. I guess they can't use the other pump spell that only pumps like contracts. So maybe it would just have to be Shred. Or Flick Knives, which is like face up on the board. But this early in the game, I don't think they want to use their Flick Knives. I actually don't hate just blocking 6 and moving on here. Saving our reaction for maybe a swap. I don't think using our react in a card from hand just to be able to hammer back for 4 is as good as just blocking 6 and kind of moving on here. And that is what I choose to do. I could, of course, have used like armor plus the defense reaction, but if it's Shred, if it did happen to be Shred, he would still get us because we'd have cards in our hand. And if we block with 2 cards from hand, even if he shreds us, it's just damage because he's not going to be able to banish anything from our hand with the Shakedown. So with a hand like this, I'd really like to just like keep my whole hand and dominate a Crippling Crush, but they have a 5-card hand, so I doubt I'm going to be able to do that. I do have a defense reaction arsenal, and I think equipment use would be a reason, like having a dominated Crippling Crush, or a Crippling Crush just in general, even undominated if we had a Surge, would be worth using equipment for. But I can't imagine we get to keep our hand here. 5 go again. I think I'm just going to block 3. Saving some cards to defend whatever the follow-up is. Plays another even bigger than that. This time the attack has to be has to have 3 or more power because we took 2. Right? It has to be like more. And they get a Leave No Witness. It looks like I'm going to my Sink Blow on Leave No Witness here. Wonder if that's reasonable. Yeah, that might be fine because we can't play the Crippling Crush and we kind of want to get that in Arsenal. And then we can Sink Blow away this Warmonger's Diplomacy, hopefully looking for a card that can turn on our hammer. Because Warmonger's Diplomacy doesn't cost 3 or more, so if we made a Surge and hammered, it would only be for 4, looking to Arsenal the Crippling Crush. And using the Sink Blow also means if they did happen to have a Shred or they do have some sort of other reaction, they're not going to be able to destroy our arsenal, although I guess they wouldn't ever really be able to destroy our arsenal. We could just respond with the Sink Blow. But this allows us to maybe make a Surge and then Arsenal Crippling Crush. We get there. That had go again from the Quicken. And they don't play their Codex of Frailty. Oh, because they have Dagger into Codex of Frailty. This is a little unfortunate because we can only get back like a really bad attack. We only have blue attacks on our graveyard. And we're under the effects of Nerve Scalpel. So what do we do here? You know, we could make a Crown of Providence play here. We could discard our Chokeslam, getting back like our Thunderquake, I guess. And then just block the Leave No Witnesses with Crown. Taking 2 damage, sinking our arsenal, and then kind of hoping to get back to where we are with this hand. With 2 cards, we can hammer for 6 and Arsenal Crippling Crush. Or hammer for 5, rather, because of the frailty. We see a Codex going to the bottom, so there's only 1 more Codex coming in the near future. And I definitely don't want this card in Arsenal. There was no cards in my graveyard that would have been like reasonable in Arsenal there. Maybe I could have just let it hit, but then I couldn't have made a Surge for our follow-up crippling. He hits a Command and Conquer, so he gets a silver. What do we do here? Yeah, it looks like I still want to make a Surge so that I can resolve crippling off 2 blues. Oh no, I'm just going to hammer for 5 and Arsenal Sigil. Interesting. I thought I was going to pitch the Sigil and hammer for a 3, arsenaling the crippling. I guess it's fine. I wonder what I was thinking, because looking at this hand, I definitely kind of wanted the crippling in Arsenal to play it off 2 blues potentially in the Surge. Resolving Crippling Crush is very good in this matchup. For fatigue or for tempo purposes, it's just good both the ways. Give and Take is definitely not a card I like to block. I just like to take the damage because I don't want them to get a Codex back on top. Of course, we could use like a Sink Below and it won't get its triggered effect, but I like to save the Sink Belows for stuff that's a little bit more important. It would be nice if he played something like a Crippling, not a Crippling Crush, a Command and Conquer, because then we could just play our Sigil from Arsenal, take the damage, and then like throw Starstruck and Arsenal to Sink Below. The even bigger than that has to hit a 4, which he ends up hitting. Oh no, does he? Yeah, what is he? Oh, he reveals Shakedown. Okay. So we have Plunder the Poor here. It looks like I'm passing the reactions to Sink Below it. And then I'm probably just going to block the Shakedown for 6. And then hammer for 4, leaving the Sigil in Arsenal. I could Sink Below the Warmonger's Diplomacy, but I think I just want to use it to block so I don't have to draw it again, since we know there's something else coming here. And he doesn't end up playing the Shakedown. He just plays another Leave No Witnesses, which is quite nice for us because we can just gain 3 and then let it hit, and then we could Starstruck them. Going down to like 28. They could Snapdragon Scalers, but we'll see if they do that. They don't use Snapdragon Scalers, so they kind of have 2 cards that they don't get to use there. They kind of got an IP2. And it's a good thing we didn't sink the Warmonger's Diplomacy, because we might not have drawn a blue. And Starstruck is definitely a card that they gotta give some respect to. If it crushes, they can't play any of their stealth attacks to like swap. They can't dagger, and often they can't play like a bunch of their like contract cards either. Although we do know they have a Shakedown, so to be able to play that, we see them block with a pummel, so that's something we got to be mindful of in the future, is they might pummel us. They also use their Crown, which means that they're not going to be stopping a Command and Conquer anymore with Crown. They played Isolate. We're expecting the Shakedown to come from hand. It might not, but they had 2 cards left over. One of them we knew was Shakedown, and then they arsenaled one. Shakedown's a really good swap target, so I imagine they would keep it in their hand looking to swap. We do have our red unmovable here though, so we can just plan to red unmovable whatever he swaps into, and then pitching our Warmonger's Diplomacy, and then keeping Stamp Authority and Starstruck to hammer for 6. Make a Surge and hammer for 6. And it's being Death Touch, so I think we know his arsenal is Shakedown now. And we're still just going to use the unmovable on it. We don't want to take like 6 or 8 damage here, depending on what they give us. Just stop the damage with the red unmovable, come in with the hammer for 6. And as you can see, we're even though they banished 2 cards off the top with contracts, we only have 16 cards in Graveyard and Banish, and they have 19. So even though they started with 6 more cards, we're slowly getting like better fatigue rate on our cards. I would say mainly because of Anothos just being so much damage with 0 cards spent from deck. It's pretty hard to fatigue Bravo. Another give and take. I'm not blocking it. I don't want to give him back a card. Not really because of fatigue, but I don't really want him to draw like a Codex and just be able to play multiple Codexes this game, or like more than normal. We do have to be mindful of our life though. I guess I'm thinking about Civic Steps here, because if I blocked with Civic Steps, it's probably difficult for him to play an attack with Go again and then play something else. But we know he has a Shakedown in Arsenal, so he could have played Shakedown and then potentially like had a Codex or a 0-cost contract, which might have been pretty bad for us if we block with Civic Steps there. He's attacking us with a Shakedown here, but we have a Crippling Crush we really want to play. So what are our options? We could block with 2 equipment and 1 card to throw a Crippling Crush undominated. We could just let Shakedown hit and force him to have the reaction in hand or use Flick Knives. Don't love that. The other option is to just block with all of our equipment. If we block with all of our equipment, we beat the Flick Knives, but we lose to Shred. Oftentimes when Uzuri plays Shakedown against you and you keep 4 cards, like they name red instead of blue, so they would take our threat, and that would be pretty bad for us. If they name blue, it'd be fine. We'd just like throw Crippling undominated. So out of those 3 lines, which do I like? I'm feeling like I need to make something happen because I don't want to keep trading life equally until we're both low. I think I need to make something happen here. So I think I'm going to block with all my equipment. Giving them a Quicken, which hopefully they won't be able to use because we're dominating a Crippling Crush on them. And even if the card they have in hand is Defense Reaction, they're going to have to block with their Flick Knives or their Tunic unless they draw another Defense Reaction in their next 4 cards. Because they have to block 8 on Crippling Crush, right? So even if it's Defense Reaction and a 3 block from hand, it won't be enough. And this is a little greedy and sort of aggressive, like an aggressive use of my equipment. But if they don't have Shred, phew, we got through without a Shred. If they don't have Shred, I actually kind of like it here. Because even if they stop Crippling Crush, as long as they don't have 2 4 blocks, 1 in Arsenal, 1 in hand, I like getting Flick Knives or Tunic here. They just pass, which is always scary because the 0 for 4s would be reaction speed. They play a Fate from hand. Do they have another in Arsenal? No, we get them here. And this could be a huge break for us in this game. They just pass. And we draw another Crippling Crush, and we get to just throw it undominated, and then Arsenal Pummel. Very good. I don't know if our opponent just didn't want to waste a Quicken by like pitching a card to Dagger, or if they had like a red or something. I guess if they had a red, they could have used Tunic, but maybe they wanted to like save the Quicken. And I think we might get to getting away with one here. Stealing this game away with that armor usage. Because we got to dominate Crippling to land, and then we got to play another Crippling. So we got to strip them of 3 cards, 2 hands in a row. The first time actually dealt damage, the second time not so much. But Uzuri with only 1 card in hand generally can't do too much unless their arsenal is exactly a stealth card. Boo, it ends up being a stealth card here. But our 5 cards is like crazy. We can play Rouse and then pummel the Rouse. So I think here I'm just going to let him do his worst and cross my fingers that it doesn't disrupt my plan. And it is just a Death Touch, which is perfectly fine. Ends up giving us a Blood Rot. So they 2-card 8 us, which is pretty good, but we get to just go way over the top here with dealing 11 with a pummeled Rouse and then 6 with Anothos. So what is that, 17 damage plus they discard a card, so it's almost like 20 value off 5 cards, which is not bad. If you get 4 value for each of your cards, you'll probably end up going to win a value game by doing that. Even get to make a Surge for good measure, so if that has any value, it's like 21 value. And pulling this far ahead in life and tempo, so we got a bunch of HP from him, and he has 0 cards. So if we draw anything reasonable here, I think we just like stole this game away. Command and Conquer. So I go to make a Surge and then play Command and Conquer. I sort of want him to be afraid of Pummel because clearly he doesn't have an arsenal, so the on-hit effect of Command and Conquer isn't doing anything. But there's a chance he has defense reactions in hand that he would like to use and like save his other cards in hand that could push a little tempo. That's the only reason why I didn't hammer. I think when I make this decision, I need to play Command and Conquer faster. There's some timing tells here. Because I was waiting and thinking before I played the Command and Conquer, my opponent might not put me on Pummel because I don't think it takes long for a player to see Pummel and Command and Conquer and be really excited to just play it. These timing tells are sometimes very hard to utilize because a lot of times good players just kind of take their time to think, even if there's something as obvious as like having full tempo and a pummel and a Command and Conquer and a pummel. But a lot of times these timing tells might actually like give you some value over like a long, I don't know what I'll call it, a Flesh and Blood career. Like if you play Flesh and Blood for a very long time and a timing tell, you know, gives you value once every 25 games, you're going to get a lot of value over those like few years, right? And I think I just did a timing tell with thinking about my play before I played this Command and Conquer. So I think because I thought about it, my opponent could reasonably take me off of Pummel. But it's a little niche, but you know, we look for our edges everywhere you can. Arsenaling defense reaction, of course. Being up 11 life is pretty good here. They play a Censor. I don't think there's ever a chance they name a card we actually want to play here. Because, like, what would they actually name? Because what we want to, I mean, what we want to do here is just block 4 with one of our 2 defense reactions. Probably the one in Arsenal. Just in case he Snapdragon Scalers into Command and Conquer. But we probably just want to block 4 here, and then Sigil, Hammer for 6, Arsenal, Sink Below. And I don't think there's a world where my opponent is ever naming Sigil of Solace with Censor. They're probably going to name, like, if I'm keeping a big hand, if I'm only blocking 4 and keeping 4 cards, they're probably naming, like, Crippling Crush or Starstruck or something. I have 2 Crippling Crushes in my graveyard, so maybe they name something that's not Crippling Crush, but more often than not, I see people name Crippling Crush if I'm keeping, like, 4 cards. Oh no, why am I playing Sink Below? What if they Snapdragon's Command and Conquer? That's the second time this game that I've done that I've left myself vulnerable to like a very obvious line. In the middle of the game, there's probably just a lot of things going through my head, and I make little slight mistakes like that. That when going back and watching the game, I'm like, oh no, what are you doing? They ended up, what did they name? I don't know what they named, but it doesn't matter because they just get hit. They just get hit for 6. They end up full blocking it with a card and defense reaction. We're going to gain 3 life up to 19, and we're going to just be in a very good spot here to threaten them when they can't threaten us in the same way. So they're throwing a Death Touch at us with 2 floating and a card behind. This feels like their Snapdragon Scalar's turn to me. But with 2 floating, it could really be anything back here. If they had 0, I would expect like their 3rd Codex or like just like a dumb attack, but I'd really be trying to play around Codex here. But with 2 floating, it's so hard to put them. Like, it could be any card, right? It could be, like, Shakedown. It could be Command and Conquer. It could be, you know, Already Dead or whatever 2 drops they play. I don't hate blocking with Pummel and then playing the Fate Foreseen just to cover up the breakpoint. The Pummel and Arsenal would be pretty valuable, though, because our plan next turn is to just hammer for 10 with, you know, make a surge, hammer for 6 with the 2 floating, pummel it. Just trying to bleed out their life so that we get them to that critical life point before us, which is a good way to beat Uzuri. Like, if we were both at 6 right now, I feel like we'd be in a lot of trouble. So yeah, it looks like I'm just going to block the full 6. And we'll see how this goes. He's got to be looking to try to utilize this Snapdragon Scalars at some point soon. Because you can't take them with you. You know, you want to use them before you die. So they're definitely using their Snapdragons here, as we can see. And then we'll see what the follow-up is. Just to Command and Conquer, and I think I can just take this 6 damage, go to 13, and put them in a really tough spot here. I could have potentially used equipment last turn to block 2 instead of the pummel, and then I could have arsenaled the pummel, which in hindsight would be better, but obviously in hindsight a lot of things are a lot easier to, decisions are a lot easier to make once you've seen the outcome of your previous decision. They block 6, and I'm just going to pummel here. Like, it's better to pummel and attack, but they have so many ways to attack Arsenal that I'm just going to get the pummel out of there. I think they might only have 1 more Command and Conquer, 1 more Leave No Witnesses, 1 more Codex, but still, it's turn 13, and the likelihood of them drawing like one of those 3 cards is pretty high, seeing as how they've seen their whole deck besides, like, what is it, 13 times 4 is 49. They started with 70, so they've like 21 cards, and you draw 4 a turn, so this is kind of a weird block. They play Hurl. I'm just, I guess, conserving life. Using Civic Steps here isn't bad, because if they have any follow-up, it's going to have Go Again, but it's not going to matter because they're not going to have any other cards in their hand. Not sure why I blocked with Tech Plating. Not sure why I blocked 2 and like not 3 here. Maybe I'm keeping this extra one for a breakpoint on like a Leave No Witnesses or something. Because if this is Codex, Yeah, because if this is Codex, I can get Crippling Crush back, discard Spinal Crush, and then block 4 with Starstruck and Crater Fist. Still keeping Crippling Crush open with the Surge and 2 blues. So that's probably why I left the 1 there. Not sure why I blocked 2 instead of just 1. They just play Plunder the Poor here. I think I'm just going to block with Spinal Crush. Just get some value. And because our plan is to just throw the Starstruck. I guess I could have... No, I think I missed lethal here. I think I'm supposed to... Whoops. I think I'm supposed to block with Starstruck and then dominate Spinal. Yeah, if I just block with Starstruck and dominate Spinal, I think he loses unless he has, like, exactly Oasis Respite, because even red Unmovable would only block 7 from hand, and 9 minus 7 still equals 2, although I guess he does have some armor. So maybe that's what I was thinking, is like just try to do as much damage as possible, get as many cards as possible, and play around everything that he could possibly have. Because of our life lead, we could very comfortably just win this game in a normal fashion, and we don't want to like give him additional value with like a 2-card hand that he shouldn't be able to keep. But here we will definitely just dominate Spinal Crush. Maybe I felt I was in such a commanding position due to the life totals. Yeah, in the dominated Spinal Crush wins. But maybe I thought I was in such a dominating position due to the life totals that just throwing a Starstruck and making him block and keeping him off of 2 cards was better than potentially running into like a 1 of Red Unmovable, potentially running into like a 1 of Oasis Respite. Because this late in the game, if you haven't seen any of those cards, like, you can be pretty sure they're not playing 3 of them. You could almost be pretty sure they're not playing any of them. But if there are cards that could potentially be getting played, that you've seen Uzuri play before, and you think the only way you're ever going to lose is if they have those cards and you choose a different line, then you probably choose the line that doesn't lose to those cards, even if there's like a very high likelihood that their deck doesn't have it. But let's say, for instance, we were both at 1 or something. You definitely just dominate the Spinal Crush and make them have it. But I was at 11, so it's like there's nothing they could really do off 1 card that would impact my ability to win with them at 1. So just throw the Starstruck, get rid of 3 cards, and move on. So yeah, this one was kind of a fun one for me. I like the Uzuri matchup. It's not like my favorite, but it's still fun. I like the slower matchups. Aggro matchups, not really my favorite. I always feel like I'm like holding on for dear life and looking for a spot to like resolve my threats. Where at least against Uzuri, it's kind of like you're probably going to find a spot eventually. You can block, you can use your hammer a bunch. Where in aggro matchups, I really hate using my hammer. Like, every turn I'm using hammer and not like making them block with their efficient cards feels like a loss. Sort of like against Briar. I know we don't have to play against Briar anymore, but against Briar it always felt really bad to swing hammer. But yeah, hopefully we learned a little bit this match. I definitely don't think I need 70 cards. Like, I still have like 35 in my deck and pitch zone. So maybe running the 70 cards is wrong. I'm not entirely sure if the chokeslams are better than the pummels. Like, the pummels were decent this game. Like, one of them blocked for 2, and then the other one just dealt 4 damage over the top, which was nice. Took him from like 6 to 2. Where the chokeslam probably would have just like turned to hammer. But 2 blocks are sort of lame. I like 3 blocks a lot better. Like, just being able to block with 2 cards on one of their 6 power attacks is pretty important. I don't really miss Zealous Belting, although that card always feels good to play on offense. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm probably gonna play with those last three slots, like whether I want Pummel or Zealous Belting or Chokeslam. The reason I was picking Pummel over Zealous Belting, even though they're both 2 blocks, is I was just kind of trying to take away a little bit of value away from Frailty Trap. Like I know sometimes like they play Frailty Trap and Zealous Belting gives them like a lot of value off of that. Like if you play Zealous Belting from Arsenal against Frailty Trap, it's kind of like a 1 card that blocks 5 damage. Giving -1 to your Zealous Belting and -1 to your Hammer. So yeah, those are just some thoughts on the matchup. I wish all you guys good luck at your pro quests, and I'll see you next time.